Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. I'd just like to take a moment to tell you about a book that I've written. It's a memoir called Fool Me Twice, and it's a story about my life with a focus on my journey internet dating, where I was scammed and injured in the process. It's an educational book that will help many other people not to get caught in the same trap that I was. I'd like to also take this opportunity to play my book promo for you. Here it is.
From life on a farm in rural Australia, where wide open spaces made a young woman yearn to know what was beyond her country town. She moved to the city, became a mother, and found her dream career which took her across the world. But still, something was missing. In her search for love, she traveled far, trusted deeply. She wanted so badly to find someone that she almost lost herself in the process and learned some hard lessons along the way. Fool Me Twice, a new memoir by Jules Hannaford. Available August 20th on Amazon.
Today I'm here with Tiffany Huang from Spill Stories. Hi Tiffany, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Tiffany, can you tell me what is Spill Stories?
Sure. Spill Stories is an honest storytelling platform for women of color. It's primarily on Instagram, but Spill Stories also does offline events that seek to build community within Hong Kong.
The women who write the stories, are they all based in Hong Kong?
No, not really. Some of them are.
Tell me how you came up with the concept of Spill Stories.
I started Spill Stories in January of 2018. And the reason it came about was because I felt like there were not enough stories from women who were similar to me in everyday media and social media content. Growing up, I'm Taiwanese American. I grew up across US and Taiwan. And I just felt like a lot of my social media content was really superficial. So you go home or you have a spare minute and you check Instagram and what do you see? You see pictures of mimosas or outfits, brunches, and there's nothing.
Cats.
Yeah, cats, right? Kids, increasingly so for me, kids. And, there's nothing wrong with that kind of content. I also like brunch, right? But I felt like there was this huge hole where people were not really saying what was actually on their minds, what they were feeling, what they were going through. And we all know that social media is just the best parts of our lives. And I grew up thinking, I wish there were more stories from women who were like me or girls who were like me. And then at the time, also last year, I was going through kind of a tougher time personally and felt like everything on social media just seemed so perfect. And there was no content that was offering me any kind of comfort in like some of the personal struggles I was going through. And so I thought, why don't I just make it myself? I've been in Hong Kong for a little over 2.5 years. And a lot of people say Hong Kong is really alienating. It's hard to find friends. It's hard to build community. But ultimately, I think it's our own responsibility to go after those things, right? Nobody's going to give you a community or to give you happiness on a silver platter. Based on all those things, I thought to myself, why don't I create a storytelling platform on Instagram that can have real, honest, unfiltered stories by women of color? And through these stories, hopefully, I can build a sense of empathy and catharsis and healing that I've wanted And maybe it can connect me to other people who are brave enough to share these types of stories online.
That's so cool because, like you said, social media, everybody's putting forward this sort of surreal, perfect world that's not really realistic. So for people who are looking for something with a little bit more depth, it's just not there, is it? And it can really actually accentuate people's loneliness or their depression or their anxiety because they're seeing all these people living this sort of perfect life, but it's not true.
Yeah, it's actually really ironic because I think the word social, it shouldn't be in social media because social media oftentimes actually just enhances our own sense of isolation instead of creating any kind of society or social experience.
That's so true. So would you be willing to share the personal struggles that you were going through that sort of stimulated your idea for this platform?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was 2017 and just generally living in Hong Kong and not being from here is hard. You're a fish out of water and a lot of people move here for jobs, but sometimes those jobs don't fulfill your entire identity as a person. So I think in general, I was struggling with being in the city and feeling like I didn't have any quality friends or very few quality friends. And then I was in a relationship and long story short, it didn't work out, but it was a really tough breakup. And so I thought I was pretty down in the dumps, not only just about being in Hong Kong, but also just not very happy with myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Did you see lots of coupley stuff on Instagram?
Oh, yeah.
And that probably just made you feel even more miserable, yeah?
So I'm in my late 20s. I'm 28. And last year I was 27. And this is a period of life where everyone is getting engaged and married. And I just thought I would scroll through Facebook and just be like, oh, God, I like F all of this.
Do you have any cultural pressure to get married?
You know, it's funny. Formally, no. But like my parents never say, oh, you need to go find a man. But it's always this kind of subtle question every time I go back home. And it's like, oh, like, do you have any news to share outside of work?
Oh, my mom still does that. I'm in my 50s. Have you got any news? I know what that means.
So are you still hanging out with your friends?
Yeah. Oh, my God. Yeah. I remember my mum asking me once if I was a lesbian.
Yeah.
And it's just like,
yeah, actually, someone I really respect at work was asking me about my dating life. And she's a woman herself. And she was like, oh, are any men or women in your life? And I mean, I obviously have no problem with people
no, of course
like
not,
sexualities,
yeah.
But like, I was like, I'm straight. But I think it's just honestly because in this part of the world, I think people make assumptions, right? Okay, she's not 23 anymore and she's still single. So what is it about? And they try to like bucket you into these categories. She's gay.
Yeah, like, yeah.
She hates men. She's an angry feminist or, yeah, whatever.
Of course.
And it's like 3 or 4 buckets. And if you don't fall into any, then you're just a mystery.
Which is so interesting because in this day and age, times are changing and people don't even need to get married to be in relationships or live their lives or do whatever. So it's interesting that there's still this subtext in people's sort of questioning and their belief systems, even though we should be much more open-minded and flexible as the society is changing.
Yeah. And you know, actually, I've never kind of connected these dots, but I think maybe even a small part of me creating Spill Stories was just like, I wanted to give people permission to lead their own unique lives and follow the paths that were right for them. I mean, indirectly or directly, there's so much societal pressure to fit into whatever image, right? Like to be successful, to get a good job, especially in a place like Hong Kong. Go buy that Maserati one day, or I'll make a down payment for this ridiculous shoebox in Central.
Yeah. Or a handbag worth like 90,000 Hong Kong dollars.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And for me, Spill Stories was a way just to be like, screw the narrative that you're supposed to play into and just be yourself and say what you feel and what you think. And that's enough.
How was Spill Stories then received by your Instagram audience?
I mean, pretty positively. Honestly, for a while, it's taken a while for Spill Stories to find itself. It's still in the process of finding itself.
You're only 9 months in, aren't you?
Yeah,
10 months in.
Yeah.
Good for you.
Thanks. In the beginning, it was just me waffling on about whatever I wanted to talk about. And I would repost on both my personal Instagram and then on Spill Stories. And then from that, I probably got around 200 followers, right? Just people I knew who liked the writing. And then from there, it's just grown. So after the first kind of phase of me writing about stuff that kind of set the tone and the brand, if you will. And then from there on, I introduced more people writing, also kind of freestyle about whatever topics they wanted. And then finally, the latest iteration of Spill Stories is I've been able to create different themes, or I call them series, where we pick a topic such as sex and power, secrets and insecurities, finding home and food, and people write into those topics. And my role is to help source the content, edit it, visualize it, post it.
How do people submit to Spill Stories?
Okay, so anyone is welcome to share their story. First of all, it's a platform whose primary target audience is women of color, but we have featured men, women who are Caucasian, gender fluid friends, right? So it really isn't prescriptive. That being said, if people are interested in sharing their stories, they can email me at spillyourstories@gmail.com. More often than not, I welcome people to also DM me on Instagram if they feel particularly passionate about a series and they just want to toss ideas back and forth. And that's been the most popular way stories have come about. Like a random person or a friend of a friend or even a friend will just DM me and be like, oh, I want to write for this topic. And then it usually helps them warm up, right, to have the conversation with me. And then I get to ask them, well, what do you want to write about? Okay, great. How do you think you want to structure the piece? And then why is this important to you? What's kind of the heart of the piece? And then through that conversation, they feel inspired to actually go write it. And then hopefully they feel a little more confident about the structure they want to take with their piece.
That sounds amazing. So do you have a background in writing?
It's really funny. Honestly, not really. All my experience in writing has been just journaling. So I got my first journal when I was 5. My mom gave me this red Hello Kitty journal. And then throughout school, in middle school, I wasn't that great of a student, but all of a sudden just killed it at 8th grade humanities, like did really, really well in the class.
Good for you.
Yeah. And then fell in love with writing because it was kind of what I did really well at, and continued to do pretty well in high school. Then went to the university, studied business because I have pragmatic Asian parents, and I myself am also very pragmatic. And then,
did you want to do that?
Yeah, I think so I wanted to because I thought I wanted to keep most of my doors open. I wanted to work. I wanted to make money after I graduated. And so then I thought to myself, what's the most versatile thing I can do that isn't medicine or engineering? It's probably business.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So went to Michigan for school. And then after that, worked in consulting. And now I work in hospitality. So never did I study writing in any serious way. I think I took classes, like non-degree creative writing classes at the University of Chicago, just for maybe around a few months. But outside of that, I've had no formal training.
And you know what? That's really cool because it just reminds the listeners out there that creativity is just within you and it's just part of your soul, and that we can all be creative in some way, whether it's writing or painting or singing or music or drama or theatre or whatever. Creativity even goes further than that. But it's a little reminder that you can tap into your creativity just by taking a risk and having a go.
Yeah, exactly. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. I love being creative. I only discovered a couple of years ago that I can paint.
Nice.
Yeah, and I really love it. And it's like, oh, I can actually do this with no training or no practice or anything. But I'm really pleased with what I do. It's cool. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
Why did you think it's important to give a voice to women of color?
So when I was a kid, these were the books that I had growing up. Babysitter's Club, Babysitter's Little Sister, American Girl, Animorphs. I loved the Animorphs. And most of those books were centered around Caucasian kids, right? And the only book I had that was of someone who was remotely similar to me was an autobiography by Michelle Kwan. And I clung to that so closely. And even if you look at movies today, it's only this year that Crazy Rich Asians and Black Panther even came out, right?
Yeah.
You've had other films like Joy Luck Club, I could go on, that have featured minority audiences. But the vast majority of pop culture today is still primarily about white people.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, to be frank, call it as it is. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so I thought to myself, I want to hear more stories about people who are navigating cultures. I want to hear more stories about the struggles women of color have. And also as an Asian woman, I think there's a much bigger role that we can play in reaching across racial lines, because we actually do share very similar struggles with Latino women or Black women or other types of, even within, like, I'm from Taiwan, there are so many other types of Asian that I wish there was a little more solidarity. I wish that people, like women, actually identified as women of color. A lot of Asian women don't. And yeah, so that's why
do you think that is?
We could talk about this for days, but a lot of my experiences I'm pulling from me being in the States. So when I talk about like my identities, I'm speaking as an Asian American. If I think about the States, right, and how a lot of Asian Americans don't identify as people of color, I think it's because culturally they're able to behave, just given some of the circumstances they're in, maybe backgrounds, and even like the physical shade of the skin, like they kind of get to reap some of the benefits of like white privilege, right? Like if they walk into a store, maybe because their skin isn't that dark or they seem non-threatening, then you don't hear of Asian people getting arrested in the States nearly the same rates of Latino and Black Americans. And so kind of as a result of that, they don't consider themselves as part of a greater group of minorities. And I just think the struggles are just very different. And so I think when people say people of color, oftentimes people just assume, well, it's like a Black person or it's a Latino person. But the word color basically means non-white.
Yeah. So it's anybody who's really, not Western.
Yeah. And then if I think about, bringing it back to Hong Kong, I think, someone asked me once, oh, you're in Hong Kong now and everyone else is Asian. So does that mean you're still a person of color? Because most people are your color. And I just thought that was such an interesting and unfortunate
That's a very parochial perspective, isn't it?
Because then, by that logic, then whether or not I'm a woman of color depends on what geography.
Which country you're in. Yeah.
It's like, no.
So your identity is going to change just by getting on a plane.
It's not, right? Because me being a woman of color is talking about the struggles that I've faced by coming from a culture that's not dominant in media and kind of standards of beauty and what we see as like power, right? I mean, all of that is why I'm a woman of color, independent of where I am. So, yeah.
Yeah, so that's so interesting. How many different ethnicities of people do you have that are writing for Spill Stories, would you say?
Yeah, so let me think about this off the top of my head. A lot of the contributors have been different types of Asian. We've had Vietnamese, we've had Filipino, we've had a lot of Taiwanese people as a result of me being Taiwanese, Chinese. If I go beyond Asian, we have had one Mexican, half Puerto Rican man who actually wrote from the federal prison system in the US. Yeah. He's in this halfway home. It's like kind of the place you get sent before you get released. So some of them have phones, and he's been following Spill Stories as a way to feel connected to society.
Wow, that's so cool. Look at the difference you're making. That's so cool that you're having that impact so far away.
Yeah.
And so he wrote for you?
Yeah, his name's Jay. So.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. On top of that, we've had, I think, 2 or 3 Black women who have written us from London. And then I think that might be, we had one, this isn't an ethnicity, but I want to call it out because it's important, transgender individual.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, who wrote us from New York. We've had a Korean American guy. One person who randomly found me from Mumbai through a hashtag, her name is Neha. She used to live in Calcutta and now she lives in Mumbai. She wrote a story.
Well, that's awesome. So it's really starting to spread across different ethnicities and groups and geography. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Do you think that by sharing personal stories, it empowers people?
Yeah, of course.
Have you seen evidence of this?
Yes. And I can give you a few examples.
Yeah.
So that woman I was just talking about, her name is Neha. She wrote about a really complicated and somewhat competitive female friendship. It took her a while to heal from, but she felt ready to write about it. So she did. And she emailed me after and just said how therapeutic it was for her to write that experience on paper and to throw it out into the world. And to hopefully maybe to shed light that these types of relationships are not okay. That was like one of the first times someone wrote to me and expressed gratitude. I can give you my personal example. I wrote once about an ex-boyfriend who I never had really good closure with. He found it. He found the story.
No way.
Yeah,
Did he?
yeah.
How do you know?
Because he messaged me.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is someone I haven't spoken to in years. And then messaged me and said, thank you for the story and hope you're doing well, basically. And I saw it on the MTR the following day and I started crying.
Did you?
Yeah.
What were you feeling?
I think I was just so overcome with like release, like, oh, this is okay. And, you know, things didn't work out, but he's not resentful. I'm not resentful. We've found a small sense of understanding.
And so did that bring about closure for you, really,
Yeah.
that you never had before?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
I
really great.
did. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice. I love that.
And then I actually wanted to talk about Jay too. So, you know, this is a baker who currently works in kind of a halfway home in the Midwest. And for him, right, he doesn't have the channels to express how he feels. He's really cut off from civilization.
Is this the guy in the halfway house
Yeah.
who's just come out of jail?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
And so he wrote about how a specific dish that reminds him of home. He wrote about Benihana fried rice. And after he published it, he sent the piece to a bunch of people he was connected to outside of this home. And it just helped reignite a lot of relationships. He got the attention of a lot of people that he wanted to be connected to. And it just made him feel part of society again.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah. And he was very happy about it.
Oh, that's so nice. And
Yeah.
that's nice that he shared that effect that the
Yeah.
story had with you. So
Yeah.
you know how it's had an impact on him beyond just publishing it, which is really nice.
Totally. One of the series was called Secrets and Insecurities, and I wrote about interracial dating and how it's difficult to do that as an Asian woman in Hong Kong because of a lot of the dynamics that exist across racial groups in dating in a place like this. And my piece ended up with two other Asian men who wrote about why it's really hard to date as an Asian man and like the kind of how Asian men are often desexualized or effeminized. And it's really difficult growing up in cultures where maybe honest communication is more repressed. And you feel this pressure and duty to be a man, but you aren't able to express any of your vulnerabilities. At least in Chinese culture, that's very true, right? For men. I'd like to think that because Spill Stories gave them this platform to talk about it, it was great that this kind of writing found a home, right? And I was so happy to give them the platform, even though they're not women. I hope that the pieces were able to bring them a sense of comfort or draw attention to an experience that not a lot of people talk about.
Yes. And I was just going to say, and help them to speak for other people who are feeling a similar way.
Yeah.
And so that's really nice. It gives voice to that aspect of masculinity that's not spoken about in Chinese culture.
Yeah. Actually, after those pieces were written, this random high school kid from Hawaii, a boy, actually messaged me and then said like he really enjoyed the pieces. And then this other Asian American guy in college also messaged and said, oh, look, these are great. And they make me rethink my identity as an Asian American guy and like kind of my life. This is crazy,
That's
right?
Wonderful. So how does that make you feel as somebody who has facilitated this kind of connection between people across the world?
Yeah, it gives me freaking goosebumps.
Yeah, it's really awesome. I feel really proud of you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah,
it's
thank
really,
you.
really cool. That's great. I love the little anecdotal stories that you're giving me about the connections that are being made through the stories and the impact that they're having. Like they clearly are making a difference and you're only 10 months in.
Yeah.
Like the potential for this to grow is huge, isn't it? How many stories do you think you've had submitted so far, roughly?
So if I look at the last 3 series, so latest one is Finding Home and Food. We'll probably have 18 pieces from that. And then Secrets and Insecurities, 18 stories. And then Sex and Power is 15. Some of those stories were written by me. I'd probably say we've had 30 to 35 stories.
Yeah,
submitted.
that's great.
Yeah.
And can you share one of the stories that had a real personal impact on you that wasn't obviously your own?
Not my own, out of one of those series. So I want to read this story by, I actually don't know how to pronounce her name, but the handle is 2_RUKIAT, Rukiat, I think. And she wrote in this series called Secrets and Insecurities. She's chapter 18, and the piece is called Am I Too Dark? So she is a Black woman living in London, and she wrote about the concept of colorism, which is within the Black community, those who have darker shades of skin still experience like a discrimination within their own race. And after this piece was posted, a really popular Instagram in London called The Shade Borough, which has like 77,000 followers, actually reposted the entire story.
Wow.
And then I got 80 followers overnight. And as a result of that, one of my most popular city of my follower base is London.
That's very, very cool.
In spite of the fact that I've never been to London.
Isn't that ironic?
I've only been like deported out of London, but that's a different story.
That's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, so I'll just read this one.
Okay, that'd be great.
Cool. So the story's called Am I Too Dark? I remember in secondary school when all the students were talking about who is the darkest amongst us. I went to a predominantly Black school for girls, and most of us were either dark or brown-skinned. I remember looking around, analyzing my peers' skin tones nervously to see who had the deepest hue. I didn't want to be the darkest. Being the darkest was like getting the short end of the stick. Nobody did. So when one of the girls who was the same color as me claimed that I was darker than her, referring to me as flick, which is a derogatory term used amongst the Black community to describe a really dark-skinned person, I felt confused. We were the same color, yet she was so compelled to point out otherwise. It was like she saw me and refused to believe that our skin tones were the same because that would mean that she too was dark. I was raised in the Black community. I grew up forming friendships with Black girls and liking Black boys. This has naturally led to my preference for Black men when it comes to dating. As a young woman, whenever I see a Black man I like, the first question that pops into my head is, does he like Black women? Followed by, does he like dark-skinned Black women? I usually don't like to speak on colorism amongst the Black community, much because I fear being labeled as a Black woman who blames everything on race and skin tone, especially when it comes to dating and relationships. I also don't like to speak out about colorism because when I do, I must dig deep into the past and recover some painful experiences within my adolescence. But I cannot deny that for years, it has been Black woman versus the world when it comes to beauty standards, desirability and dating, etc. I've heard men say that we are too aggressive or have too much attitude, yet they call Latina women spicy and exciting when they get angry. Deep Black skin is viewed as intimidating, so when you place that on a woman is supposed to be delicate and feminine, and there is a tendency to defeminize her. Regardless of all of this, I love my complexion. I love having so much melanin, and I wish I even had more. But I can't ignore how the world treats women of my color, the stereotypes, the silencing, and I most certainly cannot forget my 14-year-old self, who questioned her very own skin and even dreamed of what it would be like to be lighter in hopes that society would treat her better.
That's so powerful.
Yeah, they get pretty real pretty quick.
That's great. Oh my God. Oh, we love her. That's awesome. Oh, that's so cool that it got reposted by another Instagram page. That's so cool. I think I want another one. Can we have another one?
Cool. Let's do one that
let's do one Hong Kongy.
Let me share one of my stories that's more Hong Kongy.
Okay, great.
This is one of my earliest posts, but it's actually one of my favorites, and it's shorter too.
Okay, great.
The piece is called Private.
And you wrote it?
I wrote this.
Great.
On January 11th. This is one of my first pieces. In Hong Kong, the distance between people's public and private personas seems so vast. I often can't reach past the superficialities of work and weather during first encounters. Everyone becomes a part-time meteorologist. The pessimistic view is that people are soulless, but maybe they're simply throwing up walls to protect themselves from the churn of the city. Maybe it's an East Asian thing to distinguish the collective versus personal self and to expose the latter to only a special few. Yet, I think we are constantly, accidentally exposing ourselves because holding a shield is tiring. Even public transportation yields intimacy. I allow strangers to intrude my sense of physical space and perhaps by association, my emotional space too. I lock eyes with someone on the bus occasionally and maintain a blank face while actively wondering where they're going and what they ate for breakfast. And then I wonder how they see me. Can they tell I can't speak Cantonese? Have they passed me off as an entitled expat already? I silently ask, who are you to me? As well as, who am I to you? Are they wondering the same thoughts themselves? Are we silently sharing dialogue? We serve as mirrors to each other in quick flashes. In the deepest corners of my heart, I feel a dichotomy that even in a city where genuine connections are rare, no one is ever truly in isolation. Our private selves are never private as we open ourselves helplessly to the world to shape us in return.
Wow, that's great. Oh my God, I love the motif of wearing your shield.
Thank you.
What's your shield?
My shield?
Yeah, what's your shield?
Ah, damn. I mean,
I think my shield is
what's yours?
humor, maybe. Humor and confidence. Maybe. I don't know. I haven't thought of it before, but that really resonated with me, that line.
Yeah.
What's your shield?
Probably humor as well. So I grew up across Boston, Taipei, Nebraska, Michigan,
Wow.
Chicago, and now Hong Kong.
Wow. Why did you move so much?
It wasn't like my dad had an expat traveling job. It was my parents met in the States. They were immigrants from Asia, China, and Taiwan. We moved back to Taiwan because my dad wanted to start a clinic there. He was a dentist. He's since retired. And then in high school, we moved because at the time, my family thought it would be a good decision for my sister to go to school in Nebraska. That's a story for another time. And then I went to Michigan for school and then worked in Chicago. And after Chicago, I wanted to come back to this part of the world in Hong Kong. Didn't go to Taiwan, but close enough.
Are you glad that you came back to Hong Kong?
Yeah. I think I am so past the honeymoon stage that I can see Hong Kong with a little more objectivity. I really appreciate that there's a big expat community here. There are plenty of things that could be improved about expat culture in Hong Kong, but I think the fact that so many people ran away from home because they didn't fit in or they wanted to chase ambitions outside of their shores, that's cool because these are my people. Like, because I also ran away from home. And it's really special that there are a bunch of other people who did the same thing.
You can find a kind of pseudo family here in Hong Kong, can't you? Yeah.
I think I've made amazing friends here. I'm super thankful for them.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Back to your question about there are defense mechanisms that you naturally develop as a result of moving around so much, right? You get really good at talking to people who are not like you because you have to get along with people you have nothing in common with. But then you also put a barrier in terms of how people can get close to you, which I did for a long time. I think I've gotten a lot better now. And then also you get, like for me, I became good at just corralling groups and being sociable and cracking jokes and stuff. But was I really revealing my true self? Maybe sometimes, maybe other times was just trying to get everyone else to get along. I think now, especially with Spill Stories, I've gotten much more courage to just be myself, which is still really hard for many people. But yeah, I'd like to think that Spill Stories has taken down the shield a little bit.
That's really cool. Yeah. I was going to ask you how doing Spill Stories has changed your life. So it's given you courage and it's helped you drop your shield. What other impacts has it had?
I think it's just in general made me much more outspoken. I'll give you a pretty juicy example of this.
Good, okay. We love juicy.
So I'm single, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just trying to slog through the horrible dating experience that Hong Kong offers. I feel like there are a lot of people who cheat here. There are a lot of people who aren't trying to settle down. So just as prime grounds for bad intentions. Let's just put it that way.
I like that. There you go. That's a title for a story. Prime ground for bad intentions. Could you write that for me later?
Yeah. That's like my life narrative. So
awesome. Anyway, go on.
So this guy last night started talking to me on one of these dating apps, Tinder, right? And arguably, like so many people have told me to delete this app, and I probably should, but...
Can I just point out I've got some friends who have met and married on Tinder?
Yeah, so I've met multiple exes off Tinder. So I think it's like shopping at Walmart. Most of the store is trash, but maybe you find like
a gem in there really somewhere. Yeah,
nice pencil, right? Like, and I just keep searching for the pencil. So yesterday night I matched with someone who is not a pencil, and we talk, and then he's this guy from the Netherlands, right? A white guy from the Netherlands. And as we were making small talk, then he's very forward, just started saying like, well, do you date Western men or local men? And I read that question and I was like, oh, red light, flashing. I don't know. This question makes me feel uncomfortable. I just said, Mostly like people who grew up across different cultures. I've never dated someone who's just from Hong Kong, but I'm not opposed to it. It just hasn't happened. And then he said, oh, so you don't know, you won't be able to verify the theory that Western men have bigger dicks than...
Oh my God,
Yeah,
really?
Asian
We're going to go
men?
there?
Yeah.
I know. Guys don't realize, do they? They don't realize that that's a massive turnoff. It's like guys that send dick pics. It's like, we don't want to see them, you idiots.
You know, it's so interesting. On Tinder, there are a lot of pictures of men who post themselves at the gym, like gym selfies. And like one of my friends just pointed out that a lot of men post content that they're still thinking from the perspective of a man. Like, what would a man want to see? Like, oh, strength and like muscles. And like, and you could argue that dick pics is the way for men to assert masculinity among other men, right? So they're not really thinking about their audience when they post these kinds of things.
Exactly.
Anyway, so like, you know, maybe the old me, pre-spill stories, would have just been like, screw this dude. I'm not going to respond. I will just leave it and move on. Post-spill stories me is like, I am totally going to take this dude down. Like, I have worked long and hard to not have to be quiet about your ignorance. Like, I'm going to teach you a lesson. Like,
great. So you went to meet him?
No.
Oh, you just on Tinder taught him a lesson. Okay.
No, he actually texted me today to ask me if I was still angry, but I wrote him like a little paragraph and then
yeah, have you got it?
Yeah.
Great. I love this.
My life. So you don't know if it's true or not that Western guys have a bigger penis than Asians. And I said, wow, you just lost me. And he said, it's just a joke. And then I said, you might think it's funny, but I fucking hate it when expat men poke fun at local guys like they are somehow superior to them. You have no idea what it is like to grow up Asian or as a Hong Konger and to always have to fight this stereotype that you have a small dick. It's a really insensitive and immature thing to say, and I don't think we share the same sense of humor. I take offense to white men who poke fun at Asian men, especially as an Asian woman. I'm sick of it. It's disrespectful and crude, and it's not funny. And then he messaged me back.
Bravo. Bravo. Good for you. That's great. I love you. You're awesome.
Fighting the patriarchy with like a bat.
Yeah, on Tinder.
Yeah, on Tinder. It's just probably my target audience anyway. So he goes, sorry. And then he says, I know size doesn't matter, which is still predicated on the belief that Asian men have smaller dicks.
Yeah.
Right. And he says, I don't make that joke to disrespect Asian men. And then today, again, he texted me just an hour ago and he asked, still angry? ?
And you haven't responded. Oh my gosh.
No, I don't. I don't know if I haven't thought about if I should respond or not, but God.
I know.
But it's just very strange, right? Like everyone has heard the stereotype that Asian men have small penises. But to me, it's actually kind of a strange situation where like every race, every man, or like not every, but a lot of men are like really fascinated by this. They're spending an inordinate amount of time thinking about Asian dick, which to me is like kind of
or
funny.
the size of their own penis, or comparing them when in actual fact women want to be romanced and have someone intelligent and can make them laugh and can do lots of good things in bed.
And for the record, like the stereotype is not true. So
awesome.
Anyway, it's really unfortunate that, this is one of the many ways that Asian men always have to feel like they are not as good, or like that they aren't as much of a man, or they're not as attractive, they're not as sexy. And it's a crock of shit.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, there's so many stereotypes around men and women and masculinity and femininity and from different cultures. And people should stop judging. People should stop stereotyping. People should be kinder. We just need a world where people are kind to each other and things would improve.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of that kindness cannot be achieved without understanding and awareness, right? So
that's why we're doing this podcast, because there's going to be a few people out there listening who are going to get a better understanding.
By the way.
Have you got it? Listen out now.
It's a pop quiz next week.
What do you hope will be the future for Spill Stories?
It's still growing and it's still figuring itself out. I think the future is I want to be able to facilitate a network of women of color writers and content creators, because this is my dream, right? I think the issue with popular culture today is that it's not that these people of color, women of color, don't have stories, right? We have a lot to say. It's that maybe somewhere deep inside, we don't feel like our stories are worth telling because we haven't heard them in popular culture. And then after decades of just repression, then you kind of forget that your own story is unique. And then the second thing is like, we're not organized. Like, you don't know where to find. I think there are many examples like Tonal Magazine and like Elastic Magazine for Asian Americans. There are examples, but there can be so many more homes where women of color artists, the content artists can congregate, right? So I'd love to be a home that can connect these women and these writers to opportunities, right? Whether it's creating a certain partnership or a project or writing a news article. And I would somehow love to be the middleman that connects these people who write with like forums about expression or news or storytelling and more mass media to solve the problem that I originally caused me to start Spill Stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you would like Spill Stories to have an impact where people become more real in their social media and where they become more true to themselves as how they put themselves out there in the world, whether it's on social media or just in reality.
Yeah.
And that they're happy to own their stories rather than hide behind them.
All of that. And the long-term goal is to serve as a bridge between women of color writers and the mainstream media, right? So for like, let me give
them more visibility.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Create more visibility around these content artists, these women who like to write.
That is beautiful. And I wish you good luck with it. I hope it goes really, really well. And Tiffany, do you hold writers' workshops?
Yeah. One offline part of Spill Stories is I've been holding monthly writers' workshops since January, and they've been hosted at The Hive, who's been such a gracious host. Major thank yous to Chris Lau at the Kennedy Town location. So the way we do writers' workshops is super simple. It's usually on a weekday from around 8 to 10 p.m. And anyone who wants to write, whether they're a woman or a guy or however you want to identify yourself, come to the workshop with nothing except the prompt. So I'll share the prompt in advance. And then for 45 minutes, you just creatively write on your own. So you pick a part of the hive and you just write. And then after that, we just get together and workshop our pieces. So you read your stories out loud, and then people talk about what they liked, what you could do to make your piece better, and parts of the piece that resonated with them. So the writers' workshops are a way for me to get content for Spill Stories, but it's also just a way for people to hang out and write about something personal and real and engage in reflection, which is rare in Hong Kong, that you get time to just think and sit with your thoughts. So it's been a really powerful experience.
It can be a super thing for mindfulness and well-being, can't it? Just to sit back and reflect and to write and to really dig into your soul a bit.
Yeah, totally. So it's interesting because, you know, the way we think of therapy, right? We think of therapy as you have to pay and then you go sit in someone's office and talk about your feelings in a really uncomfortable way. But therapy can take many forms. Therapy can be in photography. Therapy can be in singing. Therapy can be through writing, right? You write about your experiences. You process them as you write. And it's been a pretty amazing thing. So, you know, one of our series was Secrets and Insecurities. And it was honestly a group of strangers just talking about their secrets and insecurities with each other, which was a really powerful thing.
I want to come. I want to come to your next Secrets and Insecurities. That'll be so cool. How amazing.
It was awesome.
Oh, thanks so much. That sounds great. And how often do they happen at the Hive?
They're every month. So I have yet to schedule the one for October, but you can find all the information on our Instagram, which is spill_stories. Or you can even find us on Facebook, which is facebook.com/spillstoriesig.
I wonder if people who are listening would like to write for Spill Stories and get in touch with you. How can they do that?
If anyone wants to write, I would be so happy to talk to them. They have to email spillyourstories@gmail.com. So that's spillyourstories@gmail.com. spillyourstories@gmail.com.
Great. Thank you so much, Tiffany. It's been so fantastic talking to you today. I think what you're doing is amazing. And it's been such a fun, awesome, interesting conversation. And thank you for sharing your story and the story of the lady in London. That was really beautiful.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about this. I can't believe I talked about Tinder, but hey, that's my real life. So.
No, and it's great. And it's the real life of many people out there. I'm on Tinder.
All right,
and not having much luck.
Yeah, makes two of us.
Yeah. Okay, Tiffany, have a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And for listeners out there, if this resonates with you and you'd like to share this with somebody else, if you think they'd be interested in writing or they'd love to hear Tiffany's story, can you give them the Hong Kong Confidential link? And if you've got any comments that you'd like to make, you can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net. I'd love to hear your feedback. And please rate and review us on iTunes. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.